Good morning, everybody. We're back to continue our research into what's going on with this misfire on the Mudman pickup here. We went over to AutoZone, and they were kind enough to loan us a compression tester today. So that's what we're going to be doing next. Before we waste any money or time on continuing, we want to make sure, as your lesson's showing you, that the basic engine mechanicals are good. So nothing fancy about the gauge itself. Reads from 0 to 300 psi. We're going to be probably around the 120 to 150 range on this engine. I haven't looked up the spec, but it should be in there. Pretty generic 351 Cleveland that we're working on today. So I'll get everything hooked up. We'll get the plugs out, and we'll rock and roll on this compression testing. See if we can locate that dead cylinder. Now, when we did the cylinder contribution test the other day, it did show that the front cylinder on the driver's side was the one that was the misfire. So we'll start there, see what result we get, and then we'll quickly go through the rest of the cylinders and see what we can determine from this basic mechanical test. Firing order here for the Cleveland modified engine that we're going to be working on today. Passenger side of the engine on the left and the driver's side on the right. Our suspect cylinder is number 5. So this one's pretty easy to remember. Passenger side 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the driver's side 5, 6, 7. The firing order sequence is 1, 3, 7, 2, 6, 5, 4, 8. 1, 3, 7, 2, 6, 5, 4 and 8 are passing. So the view from the front, passenger side, and driver side. Cleveland modified 351. So we're all set up here. We're going to get started over on the driver side. This front cylinder was the one that we found on cylinder contribution. Really wasn't doing much. I looked up that firing order. We viewed that on one of the websites today, but I made a quick sketch of it. Beautiful artwork, I know. And we're going to start on 5 over here on the driver's side, and then go to 6, 7, and 8. Do a quick comparison on those, write down our results, and see what we find. In general, a good reading, you want to find that all the cylinders will be about 10% from each other and within 10% of specifications. Of course, it does vary by different makes, models, manufacturers, so you always want to consult your specs, but the old school rule of 10 by 10 is what we're going to follow here. Let me get that adapter in and we'll get started. A quick footnote here, whenever we do compression testing, leak down testing, anytime I'm going to put a adapter into the cylinder head, you always want to check the reach of the adapter that you're using. The threaded section of the plug should always be slightly longer than the adapter that you're using. If you were to put an extra long adapter in place, you could damage the top of the piston, and that of course wouldn't be a good thing as far as compression is concerned. So I'll get this one threaded in, we'll connect up and see what we get. Okay, we have our adapter hose connected. Those are O-ringed on the bottom, so you really don't need to go really tight. You'll find if you over tighten them, you'll have a difficult time getting them back out. But I think we're all set. Looks like you got a pretty good view of the gauge there. On average, you're going to get 5 revolutions, 5 cranks of the engine, and whatever we do on one, we do it all. So 5 cranks per cylinder, and we'll see what we get over here for compression. Let's get cylinder 5 out of the way. And that looks like a negative result on cylinder 5. So we have a 0% reading here. Alright, so I'm going to switch over to cylinder 6, and that'll verify that the gauge is actually working and we'll have a good comparison. But it looks like our suspect cylinder, number 5, is showing 0 compression. All hooked up on number 6. Let's give this one 5 revolutions and see what we find on cylinder 6. Okay, cylinder 6, right around 140. That should be a good cylinder. So we know now that the gauge is working. Local fireman going out on a call. Sorry for that interruption. We now know that cylinder 5 is suspect at 0, and we've confirmed the gauge is working on number 6 with a good reading of 140. Okay, cylinder 7 hooked up. Get out in 5 seconds. And another good result. That one's right below 150, so we're about 145. And so another good cylinder. We're within the 10% rule so far. Looking good. When we reconnect, we'll get set up on cylinder 8. Cylinder 8 connected up, ready to go. Let's give that one a crank. And another good result. Again, right around 145. Up around 145. Hoping to get a view of that. So, cylinder 5 definitely having an issue. The rest of this bank looks pretty good. So we're going to skip over to cylinder 1 on the passenger side, spin the forward, and we'll see what we find over there. Set up on cylinder 1. Let's give it a few cranks. Another good result. That one is actually touching 150. Reset on cylinder 2. Ready on cylinder 2. Give it 5 more cranks. And again, this one is on 150. Get a view of that. And we're going to bleed that down. And the disconnect, in case you're not familiar with these, is very similar. It's like a shop air hose. Slide the collar up and it pops right apart. Okay, so 150 on 2. Jump right to the next cylinder here. Able to get you a little closer in on cylinder 3, and hopefully you'll see the build each time we make a revolution with the starter motor. We're going to do 5 once again here. And another good result, about 145 once again. So an important note when you're using the compression tester, you do have to have a Schrader valve in place in that adapter. I'm sure everybody's familiar with those from a tire stem valve. They are a very specific type valve, so you cannot substitute a tire valve core for that Schrader valve in the adapter. It has to be made for compression testing. Later, when we do cylinder leakage testing, in that application, we actually have to remove the valve core to allow free flow of the air. But here we want that Schrader valve to hold each one of those builds in compression so that we get accurate readings. If you ever go to do a compression test, the needle's just bouncing from 0 back up again, an indicator that you have a bad or missing Schrader valve. All set up on our last cylinder, number 4. Give that one 5 spins and then we can compare our results. Alright, cylinder 4, another good result. Looks like about, from my angle, looks like we're right around 140. Yeah, about 140 on that one. So I'll get reset here. We'll do a comparison. Looks like our highest reading is 150. Our lowest reading is 140. So variance of 10% between 14 to 15 psi of all cylinders. I'll disconnect and we'll do a comparison. Of course, obviously on this car, cylinder 5 is a major issue, being that we have 0 compression on that cylinder. So we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Okay, so we'll do our comparison here. Cylinder 5, that's the front cylinder on the driver's side that we found 0 RPM drop on the cylinder contribution test, is definitely a issue. 0 psi. And we had 140, 145, 145, 150, 150, 145, and 140. So the balance of these cylinders are all within 10% of specification, which is 125 to 150, and every one of them are within 10% of each other. So we're going to have to investigate that front cylinder driver side, number 5. The next step would be to go to cylinder leakage and check that out. Normally I would do a wet test. On the wet test you would shoot a couple drops of oil into the cylinder and see if it does increase the compression in that cylinder. If it were to increase the compression, it would be a good indicator of worn rings. But with a 0 reading, I highly doubt that oil is going to help seal that conditional problem. So we're going to jump right over to cylinder contribution. Cylinder leakage testing. Unfortunately, I don't have a leakage tester handy, so I think what we're going to do is remove that valve cover on that side and make certain that we don't have an issue with a push rod or possibly a rocker arm. That'll be determined. Perhaps I can stop by the school and pick up a leakage tester, but we'll see how that goes a little bit further down the road. Anyway, thanks for joining me for compression testing. Very basic test, I know, but really, before we go investing any more time or money into the project, it's a really good starting point. The issue being there's no way we're going to tune a compression issue out of the engine. The same would be true today on modern engines. It tends to be a mistake that many techs make. They go chasing a code or a diagnostic issue and they forget to do the basics. In this case, if we were to overlook the dead cylinder and jump to a P0420 code or something along those lines, that would certainly be a mistake. So, meet you back a little later. Thanks again for viewing, and I hope you learned a little bit about compression testing here on the Mudman's F100. It's a really nice old truck to get acquainted with the procedure.